3 motorcyclists chose the incorrect street, the wrong dog to meddle with, and the wrong child. Considering what transpired afterward, they will never ignore the sun's rays stretching in the late afternoon. Shadows on the chipped pavements of that was Rockford Hills, Michigan. The golden hour, when everything appeared. Zara, age 3, is softer, warmer, and safer. Ellis had a slight bounce as she walked, step with small fingers clutching the dents. Her German Shepherd King's black leash, for those who watched, it was nearly humorous. Little girl, just past toddlerhood, commanding a huge dog that could certainly remove her from her feet, but King didn't. His dark eyes traced her as he walked, their ears perked up as they looked around. For every odd noise, he wasn't merely he was her mother. Tasha's pet and caretaker had let her walk home the final block. From Rosewood Park, staying in close proximity, to Zara appreciated the easy distance behind them. To her, her newfound independence felt like she was in charge, but she was unaware of it. The sole explanation. And her mother consented. The reason for this was because King had been a trained K9 police dog by Zara's late Darius Ellis, the father cop. Wasn't simply obeyed. He was extremely vigilant, and lethal when needed. But with Zara, he wasted her in a way that only a dog can be. With an unwavering sense of obligation, could he allowed her to pull at his ears and climb one, even gave him her treats on his back when, seeing you, she felt he appeared famished. Zara remarked, "Good boy," as she reached up to pat. King's head, ears, and tail flicked, wiggling only a little, but his concentration. They were a small few that never faltered. Homes far from home. Tasha a couple. She was a few paces behind and holding her phone. With a grocery bag in the opposite, there was a certain quietness in the area. That caused individuals to feel too at ease, but then there was a low growl in the distance. Zar didn't respond to engines, but his ears pricked forward, and he halted in his tracks only a little, his body stiffening. Tasha looked up from her cell phone, and they noticed the 3 of them. At that point, motorbikes sped up the corner, engines blasting onward, consuming the riders weren't on that section of the street. They were not following the rules while wearing helmets. They either swerved or laughed at the speed limit. Tires screaming loudly as the sidewalk and road were zigzagged. Tasha's hold of the shopping bag. "Zara, baby, come here." But Zara tightened. Never did the daring young explorer. She flinched and simply gripped King's leash, observing with inquisitive white eyes as the bikers, however, approached. King wasn't interested, and he dropped his body a little. Coiling muscles beneath his sleek fur tail stiffened, and his eyes focused on the one of the riders saw approaching bikes. The young child was standing there with a man in fading leather jacket with creeping tattoos. His bike veered closer as well, up his arms. He smiled and revved the engine loudly. Sufficient to cause Zara flinch. King too. The biker halted with a deep, growling snarl, glancing at the enormous canine positioned defensively in front of the "Isn't the girl a bit too young?" he called out as he was walking like a beast. Zara didn't notice the amusement in his voice. King, my dog, chuckled in the stress. That's why the second rider grinned. "A woman whose hair is streaked with crimson," she snorted, believing that the sidewalk is hers. "The third is a man who has a scar along his spine." His cheek laughed. "You're in the way, kid." Zara remained motionless, unable to comprehend that these weren't strangers who were friendly. However, King and Tasha both understood. "Come see mommy now," she said. Zara made a small step back, but sharp. King remained motionless, his eyes fixed. On the rider's chest slowly rises and falls. The biker's measured breaths in the leather jacket chuckled. "Damn that dog. Scarface seems to mean business." Smirking, "I'm sure I could handle the woman." Rolled her eyes, saying, "Don't be foolish." King was more than simply a mute. Tasha stepped forward once again and looked. "We won't stand in your way, so go ahead." But the riders had no desire to move on. Instead, his engine was revved by his leather jacket. Once more, this time generating a surge of dust from the sidewalk in front of Zara's. She coughed, swiping her face with her small fists. King gritted his teeth at the air. The atmosphere clacks with a harsh warning. Changed the biker's laughter. At least for a second, Scarface. It died down. Got off his motorcycle, guy. That dog isn't G was supposed to do SH, but he never did. Due to King's total standing, nevertheless gave it a single deep bark. Wasn't playful. It wasn't your typical bark. It wasn't the type that originated with a family pet. It was a directive and a pledge. Scarface paused and twitched his hand at the other two bikers weren't by his side. Tasha stopped laughing, and her voice was cut off, moving like a sword in the air. That's enough. Mount your bikes and head out. The leather jacket grinned once more, but there was a moment of doubt in his gaze. Zara did that at that moment. She put in something that none of them anticipated. She patted King's head with her small hand. Gently, as a child might when cozy in their favorite stuffed animal, after which she stated in the finest tiny voice, "All right, King," and King disturbed. Yet there was something about the way The bikers were frozen like uncoiling his shadow. King moved forward. Slow, purposeful muscles that are taut beneath his cloak, lowering his head not out of fear but in computation. He stopped barking and, now he wasn't snarling, but rather awaiting the appropriate time. But the motorcycle riders had none aware of what they had just entered, and within the next seconds, they were going to discover that the street felt more compact now. The smile. On the air, thicker leather jacket was not quite as arrogant, but it was still there. His hand continued to flex on the handlebar. His quivering fingers suggested that he was pondering. Scarface's decision to stay or go was eyes still standing on the pavement flitting between the little girl and the King Red, appeared after he held his leash. Streak was the only person who appeared to entirely unfazed. She sneered as she got off her B. Her role was overdone, shoulders. Come on. You two are a dog. Tasha. It looks like you just saw a ghost. Stepped forward, mouth clenched. I don't understand your desires, yet I'm telling you. Scarface sighed and walked away one last time. A chuckle trembling at his head. Lady, calm down, you're the one we were just riding through. One is behaving quite suspiciously, right? Jacket was added. Restoring some of his former self-assured child ought to be removed. You don't realize how deadly this place is, though. His eyes dart down to this earth. Zara, who remained standing totally oblivious to the strain in the King, knew that his tail was rigid body motionless as Stone's eyes. There were no locks on the leather jacket. Longer simply observing that they were, red streak calculated and then made error, she extended her hand forward instead of aggressively, not even rapidly, just nonchalantly, as though she were going to pat Zaras, though she were merely some. It was a test with a random youngster on the street, to determine whether King was barking, but King. He was action snapping the sound, not barking. Tore like a whip through the air. In a flash, King stopped inches away with a thrust of teeth. He refrained from biting Redstreak's wrist. His message was crystal, but not yet. A bright red line yelled back as he staggered. For the first time, Jesus' eyes were wide. Scarface stepped involuntarily. What the hell is going on between her and King? As he swung, the leather jacket's bike lurched, stepped off Lady, control and threw his leg over. Tasha's voice was icy. Your damn dog is under control. The street was now quiet. No engines, no giggles, no arrogant jeers. Scarface clenched his mouth, barely breathing. His hand trembled near his stiff shoulders, where a knife handle protruded from his pocket. King recognized it when our King saw it, and so did Asha, extended her free hand to her palm. Don't Scarface her now. Open, her voice lower. Hesitant leather jacket was observing. King now appeared to be noticing him at last, because he was more than simply a dog. Something more than a trained dog, otherwise something lethal. But she has a crimson streak. She shoved, because she was humiliated and furious. You're going to let a dog on Scarface's shoulder? Scarface let out a breath as he tried to bite me. He didn't bite you with his nose. The purpose of the leather jacket is not that. He shook his head and moaned loudly. You're stupid. Let's leave him alone. Yet he wasn't. When he said that, he was truly observing them. He was observing King since King wasn't giving up until they departed. Scarface is stepping back, still rigid. Toward his bicycle, he reached for the red streaked on the handlebar, paused, and muttered, said. But she trailed Tasha, gently breathed while keeping her fingers curled, into her hand. Ignorantly scratching one eye and yawning, it was nearly. At that point, the leather jacket of fool committed the largest error of the. He slung his leg over his bike at night. He gave Zara a kind smile as he looked back. I hope he doesn't make a mistake. One day, Tasha's stomach was hit by a shotgun. King's body fell and jerked forward like Scarface had pulled a trigger, cursed and grabbed his red stripes on the throttle. Before the leather jacket, eyes enlarged. King could even comprehend his error. The world was already moving slowly, like if thick syrup caught everything. King, aside from King, advanced quickly. In the blink of an eye, he bounded forward, his muscles pushing him away from the like a rocket, his paws hardly picking up as he closed the door. He felt the pavement, his distance from the leather jacket. The leather jacket had little time to respond. Whoa! His hands went up, but they didn't. King's jaws clenched around his. He was jerked off his bike by a sleeve. Prior to the engine even roaring. Tow life! He struck the earth with a loud grunt he rolled onto his back, anguish fleeing him, returning to look up at the terror of hair and muscle now towering over him. And initially, since they had withdrawn, he appeared terrified as he walked down the street, arm pinned, he gasped, "Chill to see you." Under King's enormous bulk, his voice was now shaky rather than arrogant. "Call off your dog, lady, if you are breathless." Tasha remained motionless and silent because she didn't call this Scarface's bike. Revved, but he didn't shift, his fingers twitching, on the tight face throttle, eyes fixed on the skilled. Hovering over his friend Red, the predator streak froze. Her hand extended as if she wanted to assist but was afraid to. Nearer, and Zara merely observed her, a tiny hand on King's leash, as if she was aware that he would not let go. Till she spoke that, despite King's snarl. His hot breath rumbled deep in his chest, fanning against the face of the leather jacket. His teeth never made contact with flesh, although the move was loud and obvious. "And you'll be sorry you bought that leather jacket," engulfed his arm and became totally stuck. He was unable to grasp anything else than a knife, not a firearm, and not even his companions. For the first time, he felt totally helpless. "All right," he raged, "and we're finished. We're done, okay?" Tasha spoke at last. Steele repeated it in a calm voice, with a sharp sigh. "I said, leather jacket." King didn't move, "So we're done." Let go of the leather he was waiting for. Your child's breathing became ragged. He looked at Zara and wheezed. Zara tilted. "Little one, call off your dog," her mind, and then she grinned. "Okay." King immediately let go of his grip. The leather jacket tangled back and dragged himself like a guy across the pavement. King didn't know who had just escaped death. Chase him. He simply returned to his seat next to Zara's tail, flicking, peaceful, as ever past him, idly. As if nothing had occurred, as though he hadn't simply flipped the complete dynamic power on its head. Leather jacket trembled as he gazed at his jacket's pristine sleeve is free of rips. No wounds or blood. Only a dread of, "Scarface, let's go, man." He jerked his chin at him. Leather jacket paused, but after a glance at King was sufficient to cause him to falter. Red Streak stepped aboard his bike and headed for it. Hers silently, her hand trembling, as she twisted the leather jacket's throttle, gave Zara a final glance before turning to face King. Then, without saying anything more, the tires of the bikes sped off down the street. Tasha, screaming against the pavement, watched them go, her arms still unable to move at her sides till their engines vanished far enough away that she, at last, she let herself breathe. Hands crouching on Zara's small, Zara nodded. "Shoulders, baby, you okay?" King, who is totally unfazed, is a good boy. Tasha laughed breathlessly, kissing her daughter's lips. "Well, yes, darling, he is." But sirens sounded in the distance. Red and blue lights pierced the night sky. Tasha turned to face the corner of the street. The officers were pounding hard on their manor. The sirens increased in volume as they cut through Tasha. The night air is like a razor. Automatically strengthened her hold on. Zara's heart was pounding in her chest. Contacted the police as soon as she noticed the bicyclists performed their small stunt, but now that they had arrived and were presently, was too late to reverse what had previously occurred. She wasn't sure what to anticipate. A police vehicle swung around the bend. The sound of tires buzzing on the pavement prior to it rolling to a halt before King rose. But not in a combative manner. Even anxiously preparing, the front door opened, and a well-known person entered. Miguel Ramirez. Tasha, our out officer, let out a breath. Thank God Darius knew Ramirez's deceased spouse from when they were both in uniform. He had been there that day as well. If there was someone she knew, they buried him, trusted to take care of this. He looked at the street for a moment. The strain is still marked by a dispersed skid, dense in the atmosphere, followed by King's. The only thing that changed was the expression. Who do I need to arrest? He asked. Tasha exhaled nervously. There Ramirez nodded and took out a tiny notebook with 3 names. He doesn't know, squatted down and turned to face Zara, so he was at eye level with her. Zara nodded. You're doing fine, Princessa, Ramirez smirked. I bet. And Kink was a good boy. King remained motionless, although his ear twitched in response to the sound of he knew Ramirez's voice. The officer faced Tasha again, saying, You receive a plate number, but I was able to get a clear view of one of those. Tall, slender leather. One of the jacket tattoos had a scar. Ramirez's look on his cheek. Tasha nodded, shifting the scar on her face. Yes, that's why Ramirez looked at Officer Dana Fields, his partner, who had simply left the passenger seat. Fields asked, Is that your guy holding up? A mug appeared on the screen of her phone by G displayed the identical expression that had just been Scarface, standing on this very street. Who is he? Tasha's stomach sank. Exhaling, Ramirez said, Marlon Decker wanted in. Association with a series of attacks, and we've been attempting to identify thefts. He's been dealing with something for weeks, yet if he was slipping through the gaps he didn't just come to bother you. Pestering Tasha interrupted him just before he was ready. Ramirez pulled a knife, stiffening. Fields, her hand went straight to her radio. Please note that Marlon Decker was seen perhaps close to Rockford Hills armed. Ramirez turned to face King. Tail was still in a relaxed position, but something was seen in his eyes. Something that made it clear to Ramirez what had occurred before their arrival. He didn't need to inquire. Instead, he turned to Tasha. So please explain how awful. Was it Tasha's hesitation when she looked at Zara? Somebody had a loose thread in their hands now, on her dress without realizing that she having just confirmed a possible experience that threatened her life. She sighed. King took care of it. Ramirez raised and Tasha raised her eyebrows and looked at him. His mouth quirked directly behind him. Please note that the Fields radio cracked. Unit 12. A suspicious car was seen traveling south on Elmwood. Ramirez instantly stood up. Fields had already started to move, returning to the squad car. We were given. Yes, we did get him. Ramirez turned. Return to Tasha one final time, please. Thank you for coming. Tasha nodded, paused, then grinned slightly. He cocked his chin in King's direction. Good boy. King then gave a single tail-wagging motion. The patrol car was peeling, and Ramirez was gone. Sirens are flashing along the road as it vanished into the night, and as if that it was finished practically because Tasha was aware that even if those motorcycle riders were apprehended notwithstanding Marlon Decker was imprisoned, where Zara wouldn't recall this if it were theirs. King never forgets the night. Night had become deeply unpleasant. The streetlights buzzed overhead in quiet, extending the pavement's shadows. However, it was the first time in hours that there was only stillness in the air. No strain. Tasha rubbed her and exhaled slowly. Zara Temples is totally untouched. By all of the recent events had began swinging and humming to herself. Like nothing. King's leash sways back and forth, had altered, but something had changed. For King and Tasha, for those motorcyclists who she looked and believed they controlled this place. Down at King, who continued to observe the road with a police vehicle, had vanished, his ears quivering a little as though he were still assimilating what had just. Are you all right, big guy? She inquired. King stroked his ear gently before turning. He blinked once slowly and purposefully at her. Prior to adopting a comfortable position, Tasha recognized that he wasn't tense. No more. Although he was remembering not to, she moaned. Never tonight. Reaching. You saved her, King. All the way down to Pat's skull. leaned a little after licking his lips. Zara burst out laughing as she touched her, unaware of how much her mother's words, that my hero Tasha from Mommy King, said Zara's locks were brushed back with a little laugh. From her expression, he is baby. But only her phone buzzed in her ears as she spoke. Frowning, she took it out of her pocket and looked at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. Nearly disregarded it. But something within her, her instinct prompted her to respond, so she swiped to say hello to a deep, unknown voice. The male voice on the line said, "Your Tasha's tummy was fortunate to have the dog there." She let go of the phone, and her grip tightened. Who is this low-pitched chuckle directed at? Just know that we don't need to tell you that. Remember things like this sentence, died. Tasha stood, and the phone froze. King must have sensed it as he was pressed to her ear. The change in her breathing, her shoulders tensed up because Zara growled in a low, hardly perceptible voice. Didn't realize she was too preoccupied with spinning, laughing in circles while she created King's Tasha's heart, pounded as the leash swung. They weren't even finished against her ribcage, with the police pursuing them, despite King is causing them to flee like terrified children. They wouldn't let this go, boys. After taking a deep breath, Tasha lowered oneself and placed both hands on Zara's little shoulders, press against her daughter to gaze into her eyes. "Sweetheart," she whispered softly but firmly, "listen to me. You don't go anywhere from now on." Zara blinked. "You understand without me." She didn't even mention the park. Sasha pouted, "But I enjoy the swings." Gulped hard to maintain her composure. "I understand, sweetie, but we must be together." "All right, Zara, just for a short time." After giving this some thought, I nodded. "All right." She returned to King and patted his. King licked your head, keeping us secure. Her hand was wiggling his tail a little, and suddenly, Zara's concerns, Tasha vanished. But she wasn't. She was scared and angry because they believed she was merely a woman. They could scare them if they believed. Making a phone call in the dark was sufficient to frighten her. But they overlooked one thing she wasn't scared of. And she was certain as her gaze flicked down, but she wasn't alone. King, who had once more shifted his, "Look out into the street and observe while you wait." If they returned, they wouldn't be prepared. The people making the decisions that evening were quiet once again. But Tasha now understood that wasn't tired of such cowards. Refused to let go of things they didn't like, being placed in their proper location, particularly not by a lady with her dog, but she refused to live in constant fear. And Zara King was not seated next to her on the porch while she drank her tea and gazed. Zara had fallen outside on the empty street, curled up in bed and fell asleep almost immediately. With her plush toys securely guarded King, he wasn't even dozing off, and Tasha could see the path in the dim porch light. His eyes lingered, and his ears flicked. He was aware that this wasn't just no longer home. It was a battleground. But King had previously stated that this washes territory. If they returned, they would be interacting with more than simply Tasha. They would have to cope with a skilled defender who had no idea how to lose. Tasha extended her arm and ran her fingertips down. "We obtained this through King's thick fur." King didn't move or wag, did we, boy? But the tiny, sharp exhale from his tail. The only response she had was through his nose. Needed. They weren't afraid, but prepared. Due to the monster stuff. They believe they are the ones all the time. Searching until they become aware of entered the incorrect area. And by then, it's never too late. Undervalue the person you're tampering with. There is no reason for some people to fight, because they won before it even started, begins, and occasionally the only thing blocking a predator's path, and they're the ideal type of protector, is prey. If you think this story is powerful, please share it. Inform people that standing can be your ground is your only choice.